On a hot Saturday in Southside Detroit, the glass door of Price Martial Arts Academy swung open and let in the smell of summer asphalt and a nervous 17-year-old named Jamal Reed. His mother squeezed his shoulder once before backing out of the lobby with a hopeful smile. The dojo swallowed him. Tatami mats the color of seafoam, a wall of framed tournament photos, and the steady clap of bare feet warming up. Somewhere, a metronome ticked like a heartbeat. At the far end, in front of a mirror rimmed with taped-up affirmations, stood Master Darnell Price, 5th Dan black belt, former state champion, local celebrity. His GI was crisp white, belt edges frayed from years of tying the same knot. He didn't need the framed headlines to command attention. He had the kind of presence that made people pull their shoulders back and mind their hands. "Line up," he said, voice smooth as a blade. The class formed 3 rows. Jamal, clutching the loner white belt a desk assistant had handed him, drifted to the far corner, trying to look invisible. He had watched 100 hours of karate on YouTube, practiced stances in the bathroom at the shelter, whispered OS to himself like a prayer. None of that prepared him for the real sound of a dojo, the hush, the breath, the pop of a perfect reverse punch landing on a body shield. Price paced. He paused when he saw Jamal, head cocked, eyes narrowing a fraction. He gave the kid one slow scan, from the scuffed sneakers left by the wall to the knuckles calloused from work he hadn't asked about. "You're the trial student?" Price asked. "Yes, sir," Jamal said. "Jamal." Price smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We expect discipline here, Jamal, and we don't hand out belts for free. You understand?" "I do, sir." "Good, because I won't have another street kid thinking this is a movie montage." He let the words hang, then added, light and poisonous, "Some people should stick to what they're good at, running late and running their mouths." A few students smirked, others stared hard at the floor. Jamal felt heat crawl up his neck. Breathe. He dropped into a horse stance the way he'd practiced, knees bent, feet rooted, spine tall. The room seemed to tilt and then steady. "Warm up," Price snapped. They drilled basics: high block, middle block, front kick, snap punch, each technique punctuated by the dojo's call and response. Jamal chased the rhythm, a half beat behind at first, then catching, then matching. His lungs burned. His heart found the metronome's click. Price watched. Every so often he called corrections. "Elbow in. Hips. Don't float, sink." When Jamal landed a crisp gyakuzuki, hip whip, knuckles aligned, Price's eyebrow lifted almost imperceptibly. It dropped quickly, as if caught betraying respect. "Partner up," Price said. "Light contact, point sparring. White belts just observe." Jamal froze with the other beginners and pretended not to notice the sideways glances. A tall orange belt with braces nudged him. "You'll get your turn someday," the kid whispered. "Master Price doesn't like—" He stopped himself. "Doesn't like sloppy." Across the mat, Price clapped his hands once. "On second thought, let's give the new guy a welcome." He pointed at Jamal. "You, front and center." A few older students shifted uncomfortably. A woman in a brown belt frowned. "Sensei, maybe start him on 1 steps." Price cut her off with a look. "He'll be fine. We're all family here." He made the word family sound like a test. Jamal stepped onto the center square. His palms were damp. He rubbed them on his gi pants and bowed. "Us." Price didn't return the bow. He nodded to a black belt assistant, a stocky guy named Troy. 2 points, clean technique. I'll ref." Troy touched gloves with Jamal, soft voice behind his mouthguard. "I'll keep it light, kid." Jamal nodded, fighting the flutter in his chest. "Ready?" Price called. "Hajime." Troy moved like a car idling in first gear, small fakes, toes whispering on the mat. Jamal's world tunneled to wrists, hips, ankles. "Watch the shoulders," he remembered from a video. "The punch is born in the feet." Troy feinted high. Jamal flinched. The black belt's jab tapped his forehead like a door knock. "Point." Price grinned without smiling. Again. The second exchange came fast. Troy shuffled, brought his lead leg up as if to front kick. Jamal bit on it, hands dipping a fatal inch. The real shot was a middle punch that stopped a breath shy of Jamal's ribs. Point 2. The room exhaled. The lesson had been demonstrated. Pecking order established. Price turned to the watching students. "See the difference? Training versus pretending. Some people grow up thinking their anger is a style. It isn't." A laugh here, a cough there. Jamal heard all of it and none of it. The blood sound in his ears got loud. He ground his heel into the mat until he felt the texture of it push back. Hips, don't float, sink, breathe. Final exchange, Price said, bored already. Make it clean, Troy circled. This time Jamal didn't chase the hands. He looked where the punch would be born, the foot, the knee, the hip. The instant Troy's heel lifted, Jamal slid off the line, left foot scraping a small half moon. He brought his forearm up in a tight age uke, not to block but to ride Troy's jab past his face. His right hand chambered on its own. Hips snapped, gyakuzuki. Not hard, not wild, just precise, two knuckles touching Troy's chest protector right above the solar plexus. Troy's breath left him in a surprised, huh. Silence. Price's mouth twitched. No point, he said quickly. Control was sloppy. Murmurs. A couple of teens exchanged looks. The brown belt's eyebrows climbed. Jamal's pulse hammered. He'd felt it. A clean line from heel to hip to fist. A technique so right it made a sound. Again, Price said, eyes thin. Troy recovered, cheeks flushed. He nodded at Jamal, something like respect flickering. Ready, he murmured. Hajime! Troy came sharper. Jamal didn't back up. He stepped in, crowding the distance, letting the punch smear across his forearm as he turned his waist. In the same breath, he hooked the back of Troy's lead ankle with a quick diashi barai, a foot sweep he'd drilled alone 1,000 times on a dusty linoleum floor, and rotated his shoulders. Troy's balance evaporated. His heels skated. His hips went skyward like a seesaw. A clean, startled thud shook the mat. The dojo gasped as one. A phone chimed and someone, forgetting themselves, whispered, "Yo." Troy lay stunned for a heartbeat, then rolled to a knee, grinning now despite himself. He slapped Jamal's tricep. "Nice timing, kid." Jamal stepped back, breathing hard, hands up, unsure if he'd broken some rule he didn't know existed. He bowed to Troy. "Os." Price didn't speak. The vein at his temple pulsed once, twice. He stared at the new kid as if a mirror had flashed light in his eyes. Then he pasted on a smile that made the room colder. "Lucky," he said. "Even a broken clock." He raised his voice for the class. "Again." The brown belt took one half step forward. "Sensei?" "Again," Price snapped. Jamal felt the air in the room change, like pressure before a storm. He tied his white belt tighter, feeling the rough cotton bite his waist. His father's voice, faint from a decade ago, floated up. "If he takes your breath, take his balance. If he takes your name, be your own witness." He lifted his chin and met the master's eyes. "Hajime," Price said. The metronome in the corner ticked, ticked, ticked. And somewhere between those beats, the power in the room shifted. Clean, small, undeniable. As a beginner who had scraped together courage like loose change stood his ground, while the man with the black belt realized control was not the same thing as respect. The dojo's silence was heavier than the humid air pressing against the windows. Everyone had seen it. The clean sweep, the perfect punch, the way Troy hit the mat not from brute strength, but from timing. For the first time in years, Master Price's word didn't feel like law. It felt like a cover. "Again," Price repeated, his voice sharper than the snap of a GI. Troy stood, dusting his knees, his grin fading when he caught the look in his teacher's eyes. He bowed slightly toward Jamal. "Ready," he murmured, though his tone carried something different now. Not pity, not dismissal, respect. Jamal swallowed, his mouth dry, his knuckles white against his thighs. He bowed too. "Os!" Price lifted his hand. "Hajime." This time, Troy came in heavier, faster. He faked high, dropped low, then drove forward with a lunge punch that carried real weight. Jamal felt the shock rattle through his forearms as he blocked, stepping back only a half pace. His breath came steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth, just as he'd practiced alone in his mother's kitchen when no one was watching. Troy fired again, and Jamal slid sideways, pivoting on the ball of his foot. The punch skimmed past his shoulder. Jamal let instinct take over. His hips turned, his backhand snapped, and his fist landed a controlled tap against Troy's ribs. Clean, sharp, point. Any other dojo would have called it, but Price's face hardened. "Control sloppy," he barked again. "No point." The class shifted uncomfortably. A few students traded glances, whispers curling like smoke. Jamal felt heat rise in his chest, but he swallowed it. Fighting the master wasn't about words. Switch partners, Price ordered. But instead of dismissing Jamal, he waved another student forward, a lean, quick-footed brown belt named Carla. Let's see if the beginner can handle more than luck, Price said, loud enough for the whole class. Carla bowed to Jamal, her expression apologetic. Sorry, kid, she whispered. No need, Jamal replied quietly. Let's go. They circled. Carla's movements were crisp, trained. She darted in with a front kick. Jamal slid back, felt the rush of air graze his GI. He countered with a straight punch but pulled it short. Control, respect. Carla nodded almost imperceptibly. She had felt it too. They exchanged again, faster this time. Kick, block, punch, counter. Jamal moved like someone who had studied not from teachers but from hunger, from nights replaying tournament videos, from mornings shadowboxing in front of cracked mirrors. By the third exchange, Carla lowered her guard slightly, eyes wide. He's good, she muttered. The class had stopped pretending not to watch. All eyes locked on the corner of the mat where the white belt moved with a rhythm none of them expected. When the bell sounded, Carla bowed deeply. Good fight. Thank you, Jamal answered, bowing back. Price's jaw tightened. Enough. He clapped his hands once. Line up. The students obeyed, feet shuffling into 3 neat rows. Jamal found his place at the far end, sweat dripping into his eyes, chest heaving. Price paced slowly, the way he always did at the end of class, offering corrections, bits of philosophy. But today his words felt clipped, his steps heavy. Karate is about discipline, he said. It is about control. It is not about luck, and it is not about showing off. His eyes flicked toward Jamal like daggers. Jamal kept his gaze straight ahead, jaw clenched. Price continued. Some students mistake recklessness for courage. They think landing one lucky strike makes them warriors. But in this dojo, respect is earned, through years, not minutes. The class murmured "os" in unison, but the sound was thin, uncertain. After bowing out, students trickled toward the lobby. Carla stopped Jamal near the water cooler. You shouldn't take it personally, she whispered. Master Price. He doesn't like being challenged. Jamal wiped his face with a towel. I wasn't trying to challenge him. I know, but you did. She smiled faintly, and people noticed. Across the room, a group of younger students huddled, stealing glances at Jamal. One whispered, Did you see that sweep? Another said, He's just a white belt. Their voices carried more awe than doubt. Price watched from his office doorway, arms crossed. His eyes tracked every nod, every whispered word, every spark of curiosity aimed at Jamal. In that moment, the master wasn't just seeing a beginner. He was seeing the possibility of losing the control he'd wielded for years. Reed, Price called sharply. Jamal turned, standing straighter. Yes, sir? Stay after class tomorrow. We'll see if that little display was skill or just luck stretched thin. The challenge hung heavy in the air. Jamal nodded once. Yes, sir. Walking home, his GI slung over his shoulder, Jamal replayed every movement in his head. The sweep, the punch, the way the room had shifted for a moment. For 15 years, Master Price had been the unshakable authority in that dojo. But today, something had cracked. Jamal didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that he couldn't back down now. For the first time in his life, he felt like the fight was no longer just about karate. It was about proving that respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned. The next evening, Jamal returned to the dojo with his GI folded neatly under his arm. His stomach churned the whole walk there. He could still hear Master Price's words from the night before. Stay after class, we'll see if it was skill or luck. Inside, the air smelled of sweat and disinfectant. Students lined up as usual, bowing to the dojo shrine and then to Price. But the atmosphere was different. Whispers followed Jamal to his spot in the back row. Some students looked at him with curiosity, others with envy, a few with something closer to fear. Price barked commands, katas, drills, combinations. Jamal threw himself into the movements, keeping sharp stances, focused eyes. He could feel Price watching him more closely than anyone else, circling like a hawk. Halfway through class, Price called for sparring rounds. Pairs moved onto the mat, exchanging light strikes while Price stalked the perimeter, correcting postures, scolding lapses. Jamal watched closely, absorbing details. The rhythm of exchanges, the spacing, the way each belt rank carried themselves. Finally, Price's voice cut through the room. Reed, front and center! The dojo quieted. Jamal stepped forward, bowing. Price gestured to Troy, the black belt who had sparred Jamal yesterday. You'll face him again? No excuses, no luck. Show us if you belong here. Troy hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. He met Jamal's eyes and whispered as they touched gloves, "Don't let him break you." "Hajime!" Troy came fast, a blur of black belt precision. Jamal barely slipped the first punch, felt the rush of air graze his cheek. The second kick landed against his guard with a thud, forcing him back. The class gasped. Jamal steadied his stance. His lungs burned, but his mind sharpened. He remembered the countless hours shadowboxing in the dim light of his bedroom, the way he studied every detail of tournament footage. He wasn't here by accident. Troy attacked again, but Jamal pivoted, redirecting the strike with his forearm. He countered with a sharp middle punch, pulled just short of impact, controlled. Clean. "Point," someone whispered from the sidelines. Price's face darkened. "No point. Too sloppy." Murmurs rose, but the master's glare silenced them. They reset. Troy pressed harder now, sweat dripping down his jaw. Jamal ducked a hook punch, swept low, and tapped Troy's ribs with his fist. Another clean point. Again, Price waved it off. No point, no discipline. The students shifted uneasily. Even Carla, the brown belt, frowned. She knew what she'd seen. Finally, Troy lunged with a high kick, overextended. Jamal seized the opening, sliding inside the arc of the strike. His hips twisted, his foot hooked Troy's supporting leg, and with perfect timing he swept him to the mat again. The thud echoed through the dojo. This time, the class couldn't stay silent. A ripple of gasps and even a few claps filled the air. Carla whispered, "Beautiful timing." Price's face turned red. "Enough!" he snapped. He stepped onto the mat himself, tying his belt tighter. The room hushed. "You think you've proven something, Reed?" His tone dripped with disdain. "Let's see what happens when you face someone who actually knows karate." The students stiffened. It was rare, almost unheard of, for Master Price to spar a beginner. Jamal's throat tightened, but he bowed anyway. "Us!" Price didn't bow back. He raised his fists. "Hajime!" The difference was immediate. Price moved with authority, sharp, precise, every strike carrying weight. Jamal scrambled to block, absorbing blows on his forearms, sliding just out of reach. His body screamed, but his mind stayed focused. He saw patterns, Price's footwork, the rhythm of his hips, the way his punches landed with an extra half-beat of flourish. Powerful, yes, but predictable if you looked closely enough. Price snapped a kick that grazed Jamal's ribs, forcing him back against the line. "Too slow," he hissed. Jamal steadied himself, breath ragged. His chest burned, but deep inside a fire pushed back. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. Price lunged again, overconfident. Jamal stepped aside, sweeping with his forearm to redirect the strike. In the same motion, he pivoted, hips snapping. His fist stopped a hair's breadth from Price's chest, perfectly controlled. The dojo froze. Everyone saw it. If Jamal hadn't pulled back, the strike would have landed squarely. Price's eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed. He slapped Jamal's hand away, barking, "Sloppy, no point!" But the students weren't convinced. Whispers surged. That was clean. Perfect control. He had him. Carla crossed her arms, staring at the master. Price ended the session abruptly. Class dismissed. Students bowed, but their movements were stiff, uncertain. Jamal bowed as well, sweat dripping down his face. He felt every eye on him, not in ridicule, but in recognition. As the others filed out, Carla approached. "He can't hide it forever," she murmured. "What you did tonight, we all saw it." Jamal nodded, exhausted but resolute. "I'm not here to embarrass him. I just want to train, to learn." Carla's eyes softened. "Maybe, but whether you want it or not, you've shown everyone that the belt doesn't make the fighter." In his office, Master Price slammed the door shut and stared at his reflection in the mirror. For years, his word had been unchallenged. But tonight, a white belt, a nobody, had made cracks in the authority he wore like armor. He gripped his belt so tightly his knuckles whitened. "This isn't over," he muttered. That night, as Jamal walked home under the glow of streetlights, his body ached, but his spirit felt unshakable. He had faced the master himself and held his ground. For the first time he believed, truly believed, that he belonged. By the next evening, word had spread through the academy like wildfire. Students whispered in the locker room, retelling the story with wide eyes. He swept Troy again. He nearly tagged Master Price. Did you see the control? He pulled it perfectly. When Jamal walked in, conversations hushed for a moment before flaring back up in softer tones. Some nodded at him with respect. Others looked away nervously, afraid to be caught admiring the beginner who had shaken the dojo's foundation. Master Price emerged from his office, his presence silencing the room instantly. His gaze swept across the rows of students until it landed on Jamal. For just a second, something flickered there. Anger, unease, maybe both, before he barked, "Line up!" Class began with brutal intensity. Instead of the usual stretches and katas, Price ordered endless push-ups, sprints across the mats, horse stances held until thighs screamed. Sweat poured off the students, G-tops plastered to their backs. "This is karate," Price thundered. "Discipline, endurance. If you can't endure, you don't belong here." His eyes cut to Jamal with every word, though he never said his name. Jamal held his stance, jaw clenched, legs trembling. His arms burned, his lungs clawed for air, but he refused to collapse. "You survived worse than this," he told himself. "Don't give him the satisfaction." Carla glanced at him from the next row, nodding slightly. She saw it too. This wasn't training. It was punishment. After an hour of grueling drills, Price finally called for sparring. But instead of pairing students evenly, he orchestrated mismatches. White belts were thrown against higher ranks, forced to flail against more experienced fighters. Jamal was no exception. "Reed," Price barked, "you'll rotate through, one round with each partner." A murmur ran through the class. That meant Jamal would spar with everyone, fresh opponents while his own body wore down. It wasn't a test, it was a gauntlet. The first opponent, a yellow belt, came timidly. Jamal kept it light, using controlled blocks and counters. He landed a clean strike, pulled short, and bowed out respectfully. "Sloppy," Price snapped. "Next." The second, a green belt, came harder. Jamal absorbed the blows, countered with crisp timing, and earned a nod from the partner himself. Again, Price dismissed it. "Careless, next." By the fifth round, Jamal's arms throbbed and his legs shook. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but each time he dug deeper, slipping, blocking, countering. When Carla finally stepped forward, she whispered, "Stay calm, he's trying to break you." Jamal nodded, chest heaving. They sparred fluidly, exchanging clean techniques. Neither tried to humiliate the other. It was sharp, respectful, almost like a silent protest against Price's spectacle. The class watched in rapt silence. This wasn't luck. This was skill. Finally, Price clapped his hands. "Enough." He stepped onto the mat, towering over Jamal. The dojo held its breath. "You think this proves something?" he said, voice low but cutting. "Karate isn't about showing off in front of children. It's about control, hierarchy, respect. And respect is not given to white belts who stumble in off the street." Jamal met his gaze, steady despite the ache in his body. "Respect isn't about belts, sir. It's about what you show on the mat." A collective gasp swept the room. No one spoke to Price that way, not even brown belts. Price's jaw tightened, but he forced a thin smile. "We'll see how long that attitude lasts." He turned sharply. "Dismissed." Students bowed, but their motions were stiff, uncertain. The usual chorus of "Os" sounded hollow. As they filed out, Carla approached Jamal. "You stood your ground," she whispered. "But be careful, he won't forgive this." Troy, still rubbing his ribs from the night before, gave Jamal a nod. "That sweep was clean, man. Don't let him take that from you." Jamal managed a tired smile. "Thanks." Later in the locker room, whispers grew louder once Price left. "Did you see how he kept calling every point sloppy?" "He's scared. That kid's for real." "Yeah, but Price runs this place. No one challenges him." The words sank into Jamal's ears. He hadn't come here to challenge anyone. He just wanted to train, to prove to himself that he belonged. But the dojo was shifting around him, whether he wanted it or not. That night, Price sat alone in his office, staring at the wall of trophies. His reflection glared back at him from the glass frames. He clenched his fists, whispering, "I won't let some kid undo everything I built." He picked up the phone, dialing a number. "We need to talk," he said to whoever answered, "about a student who doesn't understand his place." Meanwhile, Jamal walked home under the glow of street lamps, his GI bag heavy on his shoulder. His body ached, but inside, he felt something else stirring. Resolve. The master could dismiss his points, deny his skill, twist respect into fear. But the students had seen. They knew. And Jamal knew too. This fight wasn't just about karate anymore. It was about truth. About breaking through the silence of authority that masked itself as respect. For the first time in his life, Jamal felt that the real battle wasn't just on the mat. It was in every heart watching. By the time the next week rolled around, the dojo didn't feel the same. The mats were still firm beneath bare feet, the mirrors still gleamed with the same taped-up affirmations, but the air carried tension. Students whispered before class, glancing at Jamal, then darting their eyes toward Master Price's office door. Price emerged at the usual time, jaw sharp and belt tied in the perfect knot, his expression carved from stone. He gave no acknowledgement of the whispers, no sign of the phone call he had made days earlier. But the heaviness in his gaze when it landed on Jamal told the whole room something had shifted. "Line up!" he barked. Class began as usual with basics, punches, blocks, kicks. Price walked the rows correcting stances with sharp slaps of his bamboo shinai against the mat. But instead of focusing on the group, he called out Jamal over and over. "Reed, your guard is sloppy. Reed, that's not a front kick, that's a stumble. Reed, you look like you're dancing, not fighting." Each correction was harsher than the last, the tone dripping with ridicule. The younger students giggled nervously, unsure if they were allowed to laugh. The older belts looked uncomfortable, but no one dared speak up. Jamal absorbed each word like a body blow, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. He forced himself to breathe, to keep his movements sharp. Inside, anger flickered, but he pushed it down. Respect isn't about yelling. Respect is about control. When it came time for sparring, Price announced a change. From now on, all rounds will be full contact for advanced belts. Beginners will be paired with higher ranks. That's how you learn. Gasps rippled. This wasn't normal. Full contact was usually reserved for black belts in controlled sessions. But no one challenged him. "Reed," Price said coldly, "you'll start with Carla." Carla stepped onto the mat, her eyes filled with apology. They bowed. "Hajime." Carla attacked with precision. Her strikes sharp but pulled short, clearly avoiding hurting Jamal. He matched her rhythm, blocking and countering, both of them moving in a respectful dance. Price's voice cut like a whip. "Carla, don't go easy on him. Hit him like you mean it." Carla hesitated, then threw a harder kick. Jamal blocked, but the impact rattled his bones. He steadied himself, nodding. They continued, this time with heavier contact. The class watched, tension growing. When the bell rang, Carla bowed deeply. "Good fight," she whispered. Jamal bowed back. "Thank you." Price sneered. "Barely adequate." He waved Troy forward. "Next." Troy's expression was grim. He touched the gloves with Jamal. "Sorry, kid. Orders are orders." The round began. Troy's punches landed with force, pushing Jamal back. Jamal fought to keep his guard up, his body screaming, but his eyes sharp. He slipped a strike, countered with a clean shot to Troy's ribs, pulled just enough to show control. The class saw it. So did Price. "No point!" Price barked again, louder than necessary. Murmurs rose. A younger student whispered, "That was clean." Carla shot him a warning glance, but it was too late. Price's eyes snapped toward the whisper. The boy shrank under the master's glare. By the end of the session, Jamal had sparred 5 different opponents, each one ordered to test him harder. His body was bruised, his breath ragged, but he stayed standing. When Price dismissed the class, Jamal bowed out with the others. But as they filed into the locker room, the whispers no longer sounded like doubt. They sounded like loyalty. "That kid can take a hit. He's proving himself. Price is going too far." Later in the parking lot, Carla caught up with Jamal. "He's targeting you," she said flatly. "He's trying to break you in front of us." Jamal winced as he adjusted his G-bag on his shoulder. "Yeah, I can feel it. But the harder he pushes, the more people see the truth. You're holding your own. That matters." Jamal shook his head. "I didn't come here to fight him. I came here to learn." Carla's eyes softened. Sometimes learning isn't just about technique. Sometimes it's about showing people what real respect looks like. Inside his office, Price sat alone, jaw tight, fingers drumming on the desk. He had seen the looks his students gave Jamal. The nods, the whispers, the sparks of admiration. His dojo had always been built on authority, and now a white belt was undoing it piece by piece. He picked up the phone again. "It's worse than I thought," he muttered. "If he stays, I'll lose them." The voice on the other end crackled with static. "Then maybe it's time you teach him a lesson he won't forget." Price's eyes narrowed. "Maybe it is. That night, Jamal limped home, his body aching but his spirit strangely alive. For all the punishment, for all the humiliation, he had stood tall, and he had seen it in the eyes of the other students. They believed in him. As he dropped his jai bag by the door and collapsed onto his bed, he whispered to himself, "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every one of them." And for the first time, he realized the dojo wasn't Master Price's alone. It was theirs. And slowly, it was changing. When Jamal stepped into the dojo the following evening, the mats felt colder than usual. Students stood in uneasy clusters, their voices low. Some nodded at him in quiet encouragement. Others avoided his gaze altogether. Something was different, heavier. Master Price emerged from his office in silence, his gi freshly pressed, belt ends swaying with practiced precision. He didn't call for warm-ups. Instead, he strode to the center of the mat, his gaze sweeping across the students until it landed squarely on Jamal. "Tonight," Price said, his voice carrying like steel across the room, "we are going to demonstrate what separates beginners from masters. Too many of you think karate is about tricks, about luck. It's not. It's about hierarchy, about knowing your place." His words hung in the air like a challenge. Every student knew who they were aimed at. "Reed!" Price snapped. Front and center. Jamal's heart pounded, but his legs carried him forward. He bowed as tradition demanded. "Os!" Price didn't bow back. Instead, he gestured to the black belts lined against the wall. "Tonight you will spar with me. Not with Troy, not with Carla, with me. And everyone here will see the difference between discipline and arrogance." Gasps rippled through the room. Students exchanged worried glances. No one, not even senior brown belts, sparred the master unless it was ceremonial. To put a white belt against him wasn't teaching. It was punishment. Carla whispered under her breath, "This isn't right." Price stepped onto the mat, tying his belt tighter. "Gloves!" he barked. Jamal slid the sparring gloves over his hands, his stomach churning. He remembered his father's words from years ago. "If you respect the fight will respect you." He bowed again, more out of respect for the art than the man before him. "Hajime!" Price moved with sharp precision, his strikes fast and deliberate. A snap kick whistled past Jamal's ribs. A back fist stopped a whisper short of his jaw. Jamal blocked what he could, slid away from what he couldn't, but the pressure was suffocating. Every blow was designed not to land but to intimidate, to show dominance, to crush confidence. Jamal's lungs burned, his guard shook but his eyes stayed locked forward. Price sneered between strikes. "Still think you belong here?" Jamal didn't answer. He pivoted, caught the edge of a strike with his forearm, and countered with a quick punch aimed at Price's torso, pulled just before contact. Controlled, clean. The class saw it. A murmur rippled. Price's face hardened. "Sloppy. Again." The next exchange came harder. Price's kick clipped Jamal's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. Pain flared, but Jamal steadied his stance, jaw clenched. He refused to fold. Students whispered louder now, some with awe, some with fear. "Why won't he call the points?" That was clean. "He's trying to humiliate him." Carla stepped forward from the line, fists tight at her sides. "Sensei, with respect, he's showing control." Price's head snapped toward her, his glare enough to silence the room. "Do you run this dojo, Carla, or do I?" Carla bowed her head, but the damage was done. The students had seen someone speak against him. "Hajime again!" Price shouted. This time Jamal moved first. He stepped inside Price's guard, blocking low and pivoting on his heel. His hips snapped and his fist touched Price's chest protector with sharp precision. The dojo gasped. For a heartbeat, silence hung. Everyone had seen it. Jamal had landed clean. Price's face twisted. He slapped Jamal's glove away and barked, "Sloppy! No point!" His voice cracked louder than he intended, echoing off the walls. But whispers rose, unstoppable now. That was perfect. He tagged him. Price is lying. Enraged, Price advanced harder, his strikes faster, sharper. Jamal retreated, blocking desperately, sweat flying from his brow. A roundhouse grazed his ribs, another strike clipped his guard. Pain throbbed through his arms, but still he stood. Finally, Jamal slipped inside a kick, swept low with his foot, and for the briefest moment Price lost balance. The master caught himself before falling, but the stumble was real. The students gasped again, eyes wide. Jamal stepped back, hands up, not pressing the advantage. He bowed. "Oz!" Price froze. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, eyes blazing. For the first time in years, he had been touched, challenged, by someone he had mocked. "Class dismissed!" he roared suddenly. The students bowed awkwardly, their movements rushed. The dojo erupted into whispers as they left, eyes darting between Jamal and Price. In the locker room, Carla approached Jamal. "You know what you did, right?" He stumbled. Everyone saw it. Jamal shook his head, pulling off his gloves. "I'm not trying to embarrass him, I can't let him break me." Carla placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to try. The truth shows itself." Back in his office, Price sat seething, gripping his belt so tightly the fabric creaked. His reflection glared back at him from the trophy case, distorted by the glass. He whispered to himself, "If I let him stay, I lose them. If I break him, I keep them." His jaw clenched. "Then I'll break him." That night, Jamal walked home under the glow of the street lamps, body aching but spirit steady. He had faced the master in front of everyone and held his own. The whispers, the looks, the respect blooming in the eyes of his peers, it was growing. For the first time, Jamal felt the balance shifting. The dojo was no longer just Price's. It was beginning to belong to the truth. By the next evening, the dojo felt like two separate rooms sharing the same walls. On one side, a cluster of students whispered around Jamal, offering nods and half smiles when Price wasn't looking. On the other, loyalists to the master tightened their lines, standing straighter whenever he barked an order, their eyes cold when they glanced at Jamal. The split was unspoken but undeniable. Price seemed to sense it too. His corrections grew sharper, his drills more punishing. Every mistake was amplified, every wobble in stance pointed out. He circled Jamal like a shadow, waiting for even the smallest slip. "Reed, lower your stance. Reed, your guard is trash. Reed, are you even trying?" The other students shifted uncomfortably, but none dared speak. Jamal took the blows in silence, sweat dripping, jaw tight. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He could feel the eyes of half the dojo watching him for proof that standing tall against Price was possible. During sparring rounds, the tension deepened. Carla moved like a shield, sparring with Jamal carefully, showing the others that respect could exist even across belt ranks. Troy, caught between loyalty to Price and admiration for Jamal, fought him hard but whispered after a clean exchange, "Don't stop. People are seeing." But some weren't there to support. A green belt loyal to Price lunged recklessly, throwing wild kicks that smacked harder than controlled sparring allowed. Jamal blocked and countered cleanly, but the boy snarled, "You think you're better than us because you tagged him?" Jamal shook his head. "I'm just here to train." Price clapped once, loud enough to cut the air. "Control, Reed! If you can't handle yourself, you don't belong here." Gasps rippled. Anyone watching knew Jamal had shown control. The accusation rang hollow, and the whispers afterward were sharper than before. In the locker room, the split became more visible. Some students clustered near Jamal, asking him about his sweep, about his timing. "How did you see the kick coming?" one asked eagerly. Jamal showed him the shoulder tell, patient and calm. Others stayed near the benches by the wall, muttering loud enough to be overheard. "He's just showing off. Price should kick him out. A white belt embarrassing the dojo. It's disgraceful." Carla confronted them, her voice steady. "Embarrassing the dojo isn't what Jamal's doing. It's what happens when truth gets ignored." The room went quiet. No one answered her, but no one challenged her either. Back in his office, Price seethed. He had built the academy on respect. His respect. Now, in a matter of weeks, a beginner had cracked the illusion. "They're slipping," he muttered to himself. "My students, my authority, slipping." The voice on the phone from earlier echoed in his memory. Teach him a lesson he won't forget. Price drummed his fingers against the desk. If humiliation in front of the class wasn't enough, maybe something harsher would be. A demonstration, a spectacle, something that reminded everyone who held the black belt. That Friday, Price announced a special sparring exhibition after class. Word spread quickly, parents were invited to watch, students whispered about it in corners. Many assumed it would be Price showing advanced techniques or perhaps Troy demonstrating tournament forms. But Jamal knew better. He felt the weight of Price's glare every time he bowed in or out. This exhibition wasn't about karate, it was about crushing him once and for all. That night at home, Jamal sat on the porch with his mother. She handed him a glass of water, watching him with worried eyes. "You come home limping every night," she said softly. And now they're planning some kind of show? Baby, is this really worth it? Jamal stared at the streetlights flickering in the dark. Ma, I didn't go there to fight him. I just wanted to learn. But now it's not just about me. The other students see it. They see the difference between fear and respect. If I walk away now, he wins. His mother sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then don't let him break you. Whatever happens, remember who you are. You're not his definition. You're your own. Jamal nodded, her words settling deep. The next day, whispers filled the dojo like static before a storm. Parents sat on benches, students lined the walls. Price stood at the center of the mat, his GI immaculate, his smile sharp as glass. Tonight, he announced, we demonstrate the difference between true martial arts and pretenders. Some of you have forgotten the hierarchy that holds this dojo together. Tonight, you will remember. His eyes locked on Jamal. Reed, step forward. The room went still. Carla muttered, this isn't right. Troy clenched his fists, his jaw tight, but Jamal walked forward, his step steady, his heart hammering. He bowed. Os! Price didn't bow back. The mats felt smaller than ever, the room hotter. Jamal could hear every breath, every rustle of G fabric from the spectators. This wasn't just sparring anymore. It was war for the soul of the dojo. And Jamal knew, if he fell tonight, the lesson Price wanted to teach would echo longer than any kata. But if he stood his ground, the truth would be louder. The dojo had never been this full. Parents lined the benches, shoes stacked in messy piles by the entrance. Younger students sat cross-legged along the wall, whispering nervously as Master Price strode to the center of the mat. His GI gleamed under the overhead lights, his belt tails swinging with each step like banners of authority. He bowed to the shrine, then turned to the crowd. Tonight, he said, voice rich and commanding, we demonstrate what true karate looks like. It is not tricks, it is not luck, it is not arrogance, it is discipline, hierarchy, and control. His eyes scanned the room until they settled on Jamal. Reed front and center. Gasps rippled. Parents exchanged looks. Some students leaned forward, wide-eyed. Everyone knew this was no ordinary demonstration. Jamal walked to the mat, guy crisp but hands trembling slightly. He bowed. Os! Price didn't bow back. He addressed the crowd instead. Here we have a beginner. No stripes, no rank. Some have mistaken his eagerness for skill. Tonight I will show you the difference between potential and mastery. He raised his hands. Hajime! Price came at him fast, faster than in practice. A front kick snapped toward Jamal's midsection. Jamal blocked, sliding back, the impact jolting through his arms. The spectators gasped at the speed. Good block, Price said loud enough for the crowd. Then he smirked. But let's see if you can keep up. The next flurry came harder. Punches, elbows, knees in sharp succession. Jamal defended barely. His ribs ached, his shoulders throbbed, but he stayed standing. Each time he managed a counter, a crisp jab pulled short, a sweep that almost caught. Murmurs rose in the audience. Price barked, sloppy, no point. Each time his voice cracking with impatience. The students shifted uncomfortably. Parents frowned. They had eyes. They saw what was happening. Carla clenched her fists from the sidelines. He's calling everything sloppy when it's clean, she whispered to Troy. Troy nodded grimly. He's trying to bury the kid in front of everyone. Price launched another roundhouse, powerful and sharp. Jamal ducked, pivoted, and his fist tapped the master's chest protector with perfect control. The sound echoed crisp, undeniable. The room gasped. A parent whispered, "That looked good." Price's face reddened. He slapped Jamal's glove away. "No control, no point." The crowd murmured louder now, skepticism growing. Students exchanged glances. Jamal's chest heaved, but his eyes stayed locked on Price. He hadn't come here to humiliate anyone, but he also couldn't fold. The master pressed harder, sweat glistening on his brow. He attacked with relentless speed, trying to overwhelm. Jamal slid, blocked, pivoted. His movements raw but sharp. Instinct honed by years of self-practice and solitude. Finally, Price overextended with a lunging punch. Jamal saw the opening, shoulders forward, balance exposed. He stepped in, hips twisting, and delivered a clean counter-strike to the ribs. He pulled just in time, the control flawless. The crowd erupted. Parents clapped before catching themselves. Students whispered, "That was perfect." Price stumbled back half a step. His jaw tightened. "That's enough," he barked, voice louder than necessary. He turned to the crowd. "You see, beginners confuse desperation for skill. This is why hierarchy matters." But his words rang hollow. The audience had seen. The exhibition ended abruptly. Price dismissed the class with a stiff bow, face carved in stone. Parents collected their children in uneasy silence. Some avoided his eyes. Others glanced at Jamal with quiet admiration. Carla approached Jamal as he wiped sweat from his brow. "You did it," she whispered. "They saw. He can't hide it anymore." Jamal shook his head, exhausted. "I just kept standing, that's all." "That's more than enough," Carla said. In the locker room, whispers buzzed. "He landed clean, twice. Price called it sloppy, but we all know it wasn't. Why is he so scared of him?" The division in the dojo was no longer subtle. Lines had been drawn. That night, Price sat alone in his office, the trophy cases looming like silent judges. He replayed the stumble, the counterstrike, the way the crowd gasped. His authority had cracked in front of parents, students, everyone. He muttered through clenched teeth, "If I don't crush him soon, I lose them." His reflection in the glass didn't argue. Meanwhile, Jamal limped home under the streetlights, bruises throbbing but spirit intact. He replayed every moment, the blocks, the counters, the way the crowd had reacted. For the first time, it wasn't just whispers among students. The parents had seen too. The truth was spreading. Jamal's chest swelled with quiet resolve. He hadn't won a belt, but he had earned something more dangerous to Master Price: respect. The following Monday, the dojo's lobby buzzed before class in a way it never had before. Parents whispered in small groups, voices low but heated. Children tugged at their sleeves, repeating what they had seen on Friday night. "He touched Master Price twice. Clean," one boy insisted. "But Price said it was sloppy," another replied. The first boy folded his arms. "My dad said it was perfect." The parents weren't quiet either. A mother shook her head as she tied her daughter's belt. "If he won't give credit where it's due, then what's the point of calling it karate?" Across the room, a father muttered, "That boy's the only reason my son still wants to come." Price better watch himself. The whispers bled into the training hall like cracks running through glass. When class began, Price entered with his usual rigid formality. His GI was spotless, his movements sharp, but his eyes carried a storm. "Line up!" he barked, louder than usual. The rows formed, but the energy wasn't the same. Students who once chanted "Os" with conviction now spoke it softer, glancing sidelong at Jamal. Some looked at Price with unease. The split in the room was no longer invisible. It was palpable. Price ran the class with a punishing edge. Endless basics, horse stances that burned thighs raw, push-ups until palms slipped in sweat. He circled like a predator, snapping corrections with venom. But every time his gaze landed on Jamal, the sting sharpened. "Reed, that guard is shameful." "Reed, you'd never last a real fight." "Reed, stop pretending you belong here." Jamal gritted his teeth, holding each stance longer, driving each punch sharper. His body screamed, but he refused to buckle. Inside, his father's voice echoed, "If they take your breath, take your balance. If they take your name, be your own witness." During sparring rounds, the divide became undeniable. Price paired Jamal with the same green belt loyalist who had taken cheap shots before. Predictably, the boy came wild again, snapping kicks harder than needed, punches too close to reckless. Jamal blocked, pivoted, countered with clean strikes, never losing control, never retaliating with malice. His discipline was obvious. By the second round, even some of Price's loyalists glanced away, ashamed at the contrast. Carla whispered from the sidelines, "He's showing more control than any of us." Troy nodded grimly, "And Price knows it." At the end of class, Price dismissed everyone quickly, his voice clipped. "We are finished. Bow out." But whispers didn't stop as students packed up. Parents lingered too, their conversations louder now, no longer afraid to be overheard. "He's targeting that boy. My son says Jamal moves cleaner than half the belts here. I didn't pay tuition for politics. I paid for karate." Price heard every word as he passed, jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Later that night, Jamal sat on the porch of his home, icing his ribs. Malik, his cousin, dropped by with takeout bags. "Man, you're blowing up," Malik said, grinning. "Kids at school are talking about you like you're Bruce Lee or something." Jamal shook his head, wincing as he shifted. "I don't want to be some hero. I just want to learn. Malik leaned forward, serious now. Maybe you don't get to choose, cuz. Sometimes the fight finds you. And right now, looks like half that dojo's fighting through you. Jamal fell silent. He thought of the parents' whispers, the looks from students, Carla's steady nods, Troy's conflicted glances. Maybe Malik was right. Maybe this wasn't about him anymore. Meanwhile, Price sat in his office long after the lights were out. The dojo was silent, but in his mind the murmurs wouldn't stop. He tagged him clean. Why didn't Price give him the point? That boy's the real thing. He slammed his fist against the desk, trophies rattling in their cases. I won't lose my dojo to a nobody, he growled. He picked up the phone again, calling the same number as before. It's time. Next week. He doesn't walk out of here standing tall. The voice on the other end crackled with agreement. Back at home, Jamal's mother knocked on his bedroom door. You all right, baby? Jamal lowered the ice pack, forcing a smile. Yeah, Ma, just bruises. She stepped in, brushing his hair back like she used to when he was a boy. I hear what they're saying. Parents, students, even folks outside the dojo. You've become more than a fighter to them. You've become proof. Proof of what? Jamal asked softly. Proof that respect doesn't come from a belt. It comes from heart. Jamal swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. He nodded. I'll keep standing, Ma. For them, for me. The next day, the dojo buzzed louder than ever. Students arrived early, parents lingered longer. The whispers had grown into something stronger. Momentum. Price sensed it the moment he stepped into the room. The authority he once wore like armor now felt fragile, dented. Jamal hadn't broken the dojo. He had revealed it, and Price knew, if he didn't crush him soon, the truth would. By the end of the week, the dojo buzzed like a hive before a storm. Parents lingered in the lobby, whispering more openly now, their voices no longer careful. Students gathered in corners, eyes darting to Jamal and then to the office door where Master Price sat brooding. Everyone felt it. Something was coming. When Price finally emerged, the room stiffened. His GI gleamed, his posture radiated control, but his eyes betrayed the storm brewing beneath. He clapped his hands once. Tonight, we will test discipline. The announcement sent ripples through the room. Discipline in Price's vocabulary usually meant punishment. Class began with punishing drills. Push-ups until arms shook, horse stances until knees wobbled, katas repeated until lungs burned. Price's gaze stayed locked on Jamal, every command sharper when directed at him. Lower, Reed! Again, Reed! Sloppy, Reed! Jamal obeyed each order, sweat pouring, chest heaving, but his eyes never wavered. He moved with quiet resolve, refusing to give Price the collapse he wanted. Carla whispered to Troy between drills, He's trying to break him in front of us. Troy nodded grimly. But the more he tries, the more Jamal proves him wrong. After an hour, Price called for sparring. But instead of the usual pairings, he announced something new. Tonight, he said, we hold a gauntlet. Reed will face each of you one by one. No rest, no mercy. This is how we see if arrogance can survive discipline. Gasps rippled through the room. A gauntlet wasn't training. It was punishment disguised as tradition. Jamal's stomach clenched, but he stepped forward without hesitation. Us! The first opponent, a yellow belt, came nervously. Jamal kept it clean. Block, counter, tap. The boy bowed quickly, relieved. The second, a green belt, came harder. Jamal absorbed the strikes, slid inside, and landed a controlled counter. Murmurs rose. By the fourth round, sweat drenched Jamal's gi. His arms throbbed, ribs ached, but he stayed standing. Each exchange sharpened him, each opponent a new rhythm to read. When Carla stepped up, she bowed deeply. Hold your ground, she whispered. Their round was crisp, respectful, a silent rebellion against the cruelty of the test. Enough chatter, Price barked, his eyes narrowing. Then came Troy. He moved heavier than before, clearly under Price's orders. His punches landed harder, his kicks sharper. Jamal staggered, blocking desperately. His chest screamed for air. Between strikes, Troy whispered through clenched teeth, I'm sorry, stay on your feet. Jamal nodded, slipping a punch and countering with a clean tap to the ribs. The crowd gasped. It was undeniable. Price roared, sloppy, no point. The students shifted uneasily. Even the parents on the benches muttered. By the 10th round, Jamal could barely lift his arms. His vision blurred with sweat. But he stood tall, bowing to each opponent, refusing to yield. Finally, Price stepped forward himself. The room went silent. "Enough play," he said coldly. "Time to show what real karate looks like." He tied his belt tighter, stepping onto the mat. "Hajime!" Price struck fast, his blows heavy, each one meant to rattle. Jamal blocked, slipped, staggered. His body screamed with pain, but something deeper, something forged in years of fighting to belong, kept him upright. A punch grazed his jaw, a kick thudded against his ribs. Jamal staggered but steadied. Price sneered. "You're finished." But Jamal saw it. The opening. Price overextended with a roundhouse, balance off for a fraction of a second. Jamal pivoted, swept low, and tapped his fist against the master's chest with perfect control. The dojo erupted. Students gasping, parents whispering, Carla's eyes wide. Price froze. His chest rose and fell, face flushed. He slapped Jamal's glove away, voice trembling with fury. "Sloppy! No point!" But the words sounded hollow, even to him. The whispers became louder, unstoppable now. "That was clean. He had him. Price is lying." Price's jaw clenched. "Class dismissed," he barked, voice cracking. Students bowed out stiffly, the usual os fractured and uneven. The parents filed out, muttering openly. The division was no longer hidden, it was plain for all to see. In the locker room, Carla approached Jamal. "You stood through all of it. He can't erase that." Jamal sank onto a bench, chest heaving. "He'll just keep coming harder." Carla's eyes were steady. "Then so will you. And we'll be right here watching." Troy stepped forward, extending his hand. "Respect, man. You earned it tonight." Jamal shook it, exhausted but resolute. That night, Price sat alone in his office, fists trembling against the desk. The whispers haunted him louder than the silence. His authority had cracked in front of parents, students, everyone. "If I don't crush him completely," he muttered, "I lose everything." Meanwhile, Jamal limped home under the glow of the street lamps, bruises burning but spirit unbroken. He had faced the gauntlet, faced the master, and still stood tall. For the first time, he knew the truth couldn't be silenced. Not by denial, not by ridicule, not even by fear. The dojo was changing. And so was he. The Monday after the gauntlet, the dojo no longer felt like one school. It felt like two. On one side were the loyalists, students who clung to Master Price's authority like armor, whispering that Jamal had embarrassed the dojo, that he was a disruption. On the other side were those who had seen the truth. Carla, Troy, several younger belts, and a growing number of parents who spoke openly about what they'd witnessed. The air was thick with tension as students tied belts in silence. Even the sound of feet on the mats seemed sharper, heavier. Price emerged from his office, his GI crisp, but his expression carved from stone. "Line up!" The rows formed, but the call of os was fractured, some voices loud, others hesitant. Price's jaw twitched at the uneven sound. Class began with basics, katas, punches, blocks. Price walked the lines, snapping corrections, his shinai tapping the mats like a drumbeat of authority. But every so often his gaze cut to Jamal, and the rhythm faltered. "Reed, too slow." "Reed, sloppy again." "Reed, are you even awake?" The students shifted uncomfortably. Jamal kept his stance. Breath steady, eyes forward. He had learned that silence could be louder than words. When sparring rounds began, the division became obvious. Price paired Jamal only with his loyalists, students eager to prove themselves. The first, a cocky green belt, lunged wildly. Jamal blocked, pivoted, and countered cleanly. The strike was controlled, undeniable. "That's a point," Carla called before she could stop herself. Price's head snapped toward her, his voice icy. "I'll decide what counts." The dojo went silent. Jamal bowed to his partner, calm, but inside he felt the storm brewing. The second opponent, a brown belt, fought harder, sharper, his strikes aggressive. Jamal absorbed them, sliding with precision, countering with taps that were pulled just in time. Parents along the benches whispered, "That's clean." But again Price barked, "No point." The muttering grew louder. One parent finally stood. "Are you blind? That was perfect control." The room froze. Price's glare snapped toward the benches, but the parent didn't sit. He folded his arms, his voice steady. "We're not fools. We see what's happening." Whispers surged into open voices. The dojo had never felt this loud. Price ended class abruptly, dismissing everyone with a sharp, "Enough, bow out." The rows bowed stiffly, fractured again. The os sounded hollow. Students packed up quickly, some glancing at Jamal with admiration, others avoiding his eyes altogether. In the locker room, Carla sat beside Jamal. "He's losing them," she whispered. Jamal shook his head. "He's not going to stop. If anything, he'll push harder." Troy stepped in, lowering his voice. "He's already planning something. I heard him on the phone with someone, didn't catch it all, but he's desperate." Jamal tightened the knot of his belt. "Whatever he does, I'll stand. That's all I can do." Carla placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we'll stand with you." That night, Price sat in his office, staring at the reflection in the trophy case. His empire, years of discipline, of control, was unraveling. His name had commanded fear and respect. Now, whispers carried doubt, and doubt spread like fire. He clenched his fists. "If I let him stay, I lose them. If I break him, I keep them." The phone on his desk glowed. He picked it up. "It's time. The exhibition didn't work. The gauntlet didn't work. I want something final. Next week. Make sure it hurts." The voice on the other end agreed. Price slammed the phone down, his chest heaving. Meanwhile, Jamal sat on his porch, Malik by his side. They watched the streetlights flicker against the night. "You know you've got half that dojo behind you now," Malik said, sipping a soda. "I don't want sides," Jamal muttered. "I just wanted to learn." "Doesn't matter what you wanted," Malik replied. "You stood up and people saw. That's leadership, whether you asked for it or not." Jamal leaned back, staring at the stars. "Leadership feels heavy." Malik grinned. "So does a black belt. Doesn't mean you can't wear it." The next day, whispers grew beyond the dojo. Parents spoke at work, students told friends at school. Stories of the white belt who stood against the master spread through the neighborhood. At the grocery store, Jamal overheard two strangers talking. "That kid? Jamal? They say he swept a black belt clean, twice." "Yeah, and Price tried to say it was sloppy. Everyone knows it wasn't." Jamal pulled his hood lower, his cheeks burning. He hadn't asked for attention, but it was finding him anyway. Back in the dojo, the tension reached a breaking point. During drills, one of the younger students froze, eyes darting to Jamal instead of Price. Price barked, "Focus! You look at me, not him!" But the boy didn't answer. His silence spoke volumes. Whispers rippled through the line. For the first time, Price's authority didn't feel absolute, and Jamal knew the dojo wasn't just dividing anymore. It was choosing. The dojo's energy had shifted from whispers to visible lines. Students lined up as always, GIs crisp, belts tied tight, but the air felt like a storm waiting to break. On the left, Price's loyalists stood with rigid posture, eyes fixed forward, their voices loudest when they answered his calls. On the right, those who had begun to see Jamal as something more than a white belt glanced his way for quiet reassurance. Master Price walked out of his office slowly that night, his steps deliberate, the click of his Geta sandals echoing off the hardwood floor. He scanned the rows, his gaze lingering on Jamal. A faint smile tugged at his lips, but it was a cold smile, calculated. "Tonight," he said, his voice calm but edged like a blade, "we return to tradition. Too many of you have forgotten what this dojo stands for. It is time for a demonstration, one that will remind you." No one breathed. The word demonstration had become a code in Price's hands, a warning of punishment dressed as teaching. Drills came first, sharper than usual. Price barked out sequences, pushing the class into exhaustion. Front kicks, roundhouse kicks, endless punches. Jamal felt sweat soak his guy, but he kept every motion crisp, his breathing controlled. If Price was waiting for weakness, he wasn't going to find it here. When drills ended, Price didn't call for sparring rotations. Instead, he gestured to the benches where the parents sat. "Stay where you are," he said. "Tonight's lesson is for all to see." He turned back to the class. "Reed, step forward." The room stiffened. Jamal's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. He bowed and stepped onto the mat. "Os." Price nodded to Troy. "Suit up?" Troy blinked. "Sensei?" "You'll spar Reed. No light contact, no pulling strikes, full." Gasps rippled through the class. Full contact was reserved for tournaments, for hardened black belts, not for white belts with weeks of formal training. Troy hesitated, glancing at Jamal, then back at Price. "Sensei, maybe—" Price's glare cut him off. "Did you hear me?" Troy's jaw tightened. He bowed. "Yes, Sensei." They touched gloves at center mat. Troy leaned close, voice low. "Stay sharp." I'll keep it fair as I can. Jamal nodded once. His chest burned with adrenaline. Hajime! Troy came fast, crisp jabs, a low kick snapping against Jamal's thigh. Jamal winced but steadied. He blocked, slid back, countered with a straight punch that tapped Troy's ribs. Controlled, sharp. The crowd murmured. A clean strike. Sloppy! Price barked. Troy pressed harder. His strikes landed with weight, each one designed to test Jamal's resolve. Jamal absorbed them, countering when he could, pivoting on instinct, his movements less polished but undeniably effective. Finally, Troy threw a roundhouse kick high. Jamal ducked, swept low, and clipped Troy's supporting leg. Troy stumbled, catching himself, but the crowd saw it. Gasps filled the room. Carla's voice rang out before she could stop it. Point! Price's glare snapped toward her. Silence! But the damage was done. Everyone had seen. The match ended with Troy bowing, his chest heaving. He gave Jamal a quick nod of respect before stepping back. Price clapped once, his smile thin. Adequate? Barely. He turned to the class. Again. But this time, he pointed directly at himself. With me. The dojo froze. Even Troy's eyes widened. Sensei, is that necessary? Carla asked carefully. Price's head whipped toward her, his voice like ice. Are you questioning me? Carla bowed quickly, but her fist tightened at her sides. Jamal bowed, stepping forward. His lungs still burned, but his eyes stayed steady. Hajime. Price didn't hold back. He came at Jamal with flurries that cracked the air, punches, kicks, sweeps sharper than anything Jamal had faced. Jamal blocked desperately, sliding back, pivoting, his body screaming with every impact. Too slow! Price barked between strikes, but Jamal held his ground. He slipped a punch, pivoted, and tapped Price's torso with a counterstrike, pulled perfectly short. The crowd gasped again. No point! Price roared. The whispers surged. Parents shook their heads. Students muttered openly now. Price pressed harder, sweat dripping, his strikes growing reckless. Jamal ducked a kick, pivoted on instinct, and his fist tapped Price's chest protector clean. The sound echoed. The dojo erupted. Gasps, murmurs, even claps. That was perfect, a parent said aloud. Price froze, eyes blazing. His chest heaved. He slapped Jamal's glove away, voice cracking. Sloppy! Out of control! But the room no longer believed him. The whispers had grown into voices, undeniable. Enough! Price roared. Class dismissed! The bow-out was fractured, the chorus of "Os" thin and uneven. Students packed up quickly, but the buzz of voices didn't stop. Parents muttered openly, some shaking their heads, others glancing at Jamal with respect. In the locker room, Carla approached Jamal. He can't hide it anymore. Everyone saw. He's losing them. Jamal pulled off his gloves, his hands trembling. He's not done. You could see it in his eyes. Troy stepped forward. She's right. He's desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. Jamal nodded slowly. Then I'll keep standing. That's all I can do. That night, Price sat in his office, staring at the trophies that once felt like proof of his authority. Now they looked hollow. His reflection glared back from the glass, distorted and cracked. He whispered to himself, if I don't finish him soon, I lose everything. He picked up the phone again. Make it next week. The lesson has to be final. Meanwhile, Jamal sat on his porch, bruises aching, but his spirit unbroken. Malik leaned against the railing, shaking his head. "'Cause you're turning the whole place upside down." Jamal looked at the stars, his voice steady. "I'm not trying to, but maybe it needed to be." For the first time, he felt the balance of the dojo wasn't just shifting. It was breaking, and he knew the real test was still ahead. The dojo smelled of disinfectant and tension. By now, everyone knew Master Price was planning something. The air was thicker, the whispers louder, and the lines between loyalty and doubt were no longer hidden in sidelong glances. They were spoken outright. "Price is pushing too far," Carla murmured in the locker room as she tied her belt. "Parents are asking questions. Students are talking at school." Troy leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Yeah, but Price won't back down. He's doubling down. He has to prove he's still in charge." Jamal sat quietly, adjusting his GE. His ribs still ached from the last full contact session, but his eyes burned steady. "Then I'll be ready, whatever he throws at me." Carla frowned. "That's just it. This isn't training anymore. It's theater. He's trying to stage something final." The room fell silent. Everyone knew it was true. That night, Price stepped onto the mats later than usual. He bowed perfunctorily to the shrine, then let his gaze sweep across the students. Half of them stood rigid, eyes fixed on him. The other half shifted uneasily, some glancing at Jamal for reassurance. Price smiled thinly. Some of you have forgotten what this dojo stands for. Respect, order, hierarchy. Without it, we're nothing but street fighters. His eyes lingered on Jamal. Next week, we will hold a special demonstration, one that will remind everyone what mastery looks like. Gasps flickered. Parents exchanged looks. Students whispered. Carla's stomach twisted. She knew what it meant. Price was setting a stage, one where Jamal would be the prop. Training that night was relentless. Endless drills, punishing sparring, corrections barked like insults. Price's voice cut through the air again and again. Reed, lower! Reed, faster! Reed, sloppy! But the words no longer landed the same way. Each time, students glanced at one another, some rolling their eyes, others whispering afterward. The authority in Price's voice was cracking even if he didn't see it. Jamal endured in silence. Every punch, every block, every step felt like a promise, not just to himself but to the eyes watching him. He wasn't just standing for his own pride anymore, he was standing for everyone tired of fear disguised as respect. After class in the locker room, the split became undeniable. One green belt muttered loud enough to be heard, "He's just showing off, Price is right, he's sloppy." Another student shot back, "Sloppy? You saw those counters, cleaner than yours." The green belt bristled. "Careful who you're talking to." Carla stepped between them, her voice firm. "This isn't about belts anymore, it's about truth." The room went silent. No one argued, but the divide was clear. Outside, parents lingered longer than usual. Jamal overheard snippets as he packed his bag. "That boy's holding his own. Price doesn't give him credit for anything. Maybe it's time we look at other schools." The murmurs carried weight. For years, Price's name had been untouchable. Now, doubt was spreading beyond the mats. That night, Jamal sat on the porch with Malik. The summer air was thick, cicadas buzzing in the trees. Malik leaned back against the railing. "Words out, cuz. People are talking about you all over. Kids, parents, even folks who don't train. You've become bigger than the dojo." Jamal shook his head. "I didn't ask for that." Malik smirked. "Doesn't matter if you asked. You stood up and people saw. Now they expect you to keep standing." Jamal stared at the stars, his chest heavy. "What if I fall? What if next week he crushes me in front of everyone?" Malik's voice softened. "Then you fall standing. That's all that matters." Meanwhile, Price sat in his office long after the lights had dimmed. The trophies on his shelves gleamed dully, reflections of a past he clung to. He dialed the same number again, his voice low. "It's set. Next week. The boy's going down in front of everyone. Parents, students, the whole community. When I'm finished, no one will question who runs this dojo." The voice on the other end chuckled. "Make it clean, Darnell. If it looks like bullying, it'll backfire." Price's grip tightened on the phone. "Trust me, I know how to control a crowd." But even as he hung up, unease stirred in his chest. He had seen the looks in his students' eyes, the way whispers grew into voices. For the first time, he wondered if control was slipping beyond his reach. The days leading up to the special demonstration felt like waiting for a storm. Parents asked pointed questions. Students trained harder, but the air buzzed with anticipation and dread. Carla pulled Jamal aside after class one night. "You know what he's planning, right? He wants to humiliate you in front of everyone, to break you once and for all." Jamal met her eyes steadily. "Then I won't break." Carla's voice softened. "It won't just be you standing there. We'll be watching, and we'll remember." On the eve of the demonstration, Jamal sat alone in his room, staring at his gi folded neatly on the chair. His body still bore bruises, his ribs still ached, but his spirit felt sharper than it ever had. He whispered to himself, "Respect isn't demanded, it's earned." And for the first time, he realized the truth. The demonstration wasn't going to be the master's lesson. It was going to be his. By the time Saturday arrived, the dojo felt less like a training hall and more like an arena. Parents filled the benches along the walls, extra chairs were squeezed into the corners, and even a few people who weren't usually part of the academy stood near the back, drawn by the whispers that had spread through the neighborhood. Children sat cross-legged on the mats, their gis spotless, eyes wide with anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be a regular class. This was Master Price's stage. Price emerged from his office wearing a GI whiter than snow, belt tied with theatrical precision. He bowed stiffly to the shrine, then turned to face the crowd. His smile was polite, but his eyes burned. "Welcome," he said, voice smooth and commanding. "Tonight you will see the essence of karate. Too often, arrogance masquerades as skill. Too often, the order of things is forgotten. But here, in this dojo, respect will be restored." His gaze slid to Jamal like a blade unsheathing. "Reed, step forward." Jamal's chest tightened, but his legs carried him steadily onto the mat. He bowed, more for the art than the man. "Os." Price didn't bow back. Instead, he addressed the audience. "This student has shown spirit, but spirit without discipline is dangerous. Tonight we remind him, and all of you, what true mastery looks like." He tied his gloves and motioned for Jamal to do the same. The room fell silent, save for the squeak of bare feet on mats and the rustle of GEs. "Hajime." The first exchange came fast. Price's jab snapped toward Jamal's face, sharp and precise. Jamal blocked, sliding back, his heart hammering. The crowd gasped at the speed. "Good reflex," Price announced, his voice carrying to the benches. "But one block does not make a fighter." He came again, kick, punch, elbow in ruthless rhythm. Jamal absorbed what he could, deflected the rest, his body screaming but his mind locked in. He saw the patterns now, the half-beat before Price kicked, the shoulder twitch before a jab. Price pressed harder, but Jamal found openings, tiny ones. He slipped inside a punch, countered with a clean tap to the ribs. Controlled, perfect. The parents murmured. A few clapped before catching themselves. Price's smile twitched. "Sloppy, no point." But the whispers were growing louder. The second round was harsher. Price's strikes came heavier, sweat glistening on his brow. Jamal staggered under a roundhouse, pain flaring in his ribs. He nearly buckled but forced his stance back. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Don't let him break you." Price lunged again, overconfident. Jamal pivoted, sweeping low, and his fist tapped Price's chest squarely. The sound cracked through the dojo like thunder. The crowd erupted. Gasps, claps, even cheers. Children pointed, parents nodded, whispers turned into voices. "That was clean." "Perfect." Price froze, his chest heaving. His eyes blazed with fury. "No point," he barked, but his voice cracked. No one believed him. Carla stepped forward from the line, her voice clear and steady. "With respect, Sensei, that was control." The dojo held its breath. Price's head snapped toward her, rage twisting his features. "Silence!" But it was too late. The students had heard. The parents had heard. The lie had been punctured. Price roared, pressing forward with a barrage meant to overwhelm. Jamal blocked, pivoted, countered again and again. His arms throbbed, his ribs ached, but he refused to fall. Every strike he landed was sharp, controlled, undeniable. Finally, Price threw a desperate kick. Jamal swept low, perfectly timed, and Price stumbled. Not all the way down, but enough that the room gasped. Jamal didn't press the advantage. He stepped back, bowed, and said calmly, "Os." The dojo exploded into whispers, louder than ever. Parents clapped openly now. Students exchanged wide-eyed looks. Carla smiled faintly, Troy nodded in respect. Price's face flushed crimson. He raised his hand, forcing a smile. "You see, even in failure, beginners learn. That is the lesson tonight." But the crowd wasn't fooled. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Class was dismissed in awkward silence. The bow-out was fractured, the chorus of "Os" thin and uneven. As parents gathered their children, whispers surged. "That boy held his own." Price looked rattled. "He called everything sloppy, but we know what we saw." Price stormed back into his office, slamming the door. In the locker room, Jamal collapsed onto a bench, chest heaving. Carla sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "You did it. He couldn't hide it. Everyone saw." Jamal shook his head. "He's not done. You saw his eyes. He's desperate." Troy leaned in, voice low. "Desperate men make mistakes. Tonight he made his first. Next time, it'll be worse. For him." That night, Jamal walked home under the street lamps, his body aching but his spirit steady. He replayed the clean strikes, the murmurs, the claps. For the first time, the truth wasn't just whispered in corners. It had been spoken aloud. The storm Price had tried to summon had broken, and it was no longer his to control. The Monday after the demonstration, the dojo lobby felt like a courtroom. Parents gathered in clusters, their voices no longer whispers but open debates. Some spoke with indignation, others with concern, but all of them carried the same truth. They had seen what happened, and they couldn't unsee it. He tagged him clean twice. Price called it sloppy, but anyone with eyes knows better. My son asked me why we should bow to someone who won't admit the truth. The children, too, weren't quiet. In corners, younger belts reenacted the sweep and counterpunch, giggling until their parents hushed them. The story of the white belt who stood toe-to-toe with the master had already become legend. When class began, the fracture showed immediately. The usual os that followed Price's commands was weak, uneven. Half the students shouted it with forced energy, the other half mumbled, their eyes shifting toward Jamal. Price tried to mask it with authority. "We bow to the dojo, not to rumors," he declared. "Karate is about respect, not stories." But his voice cracked ever so slightly, and the students heard it. Drills ran as usual, but the energy was different. Price's corrections sounded hollow, his criticisms of Jamal sharper but less convincing. "Reed, sloppy again. Reed, too slow." Each time Jamal executed his technique with quiet precision, the kind that made students glance at one another knowingly. The louder Price shouted, the clearer it became. He wasn't teaching, he was defending. Carla caught Jamal's eye during a kata, giving him a subtle nod. Troy, too, tightened his guard during drills, his movements sharper, as if silently saying, "We see you, we believe you." When sparring began, the division became undeniable. Price paired Jamal with one of his loyalists, a brown belt who had made no secret of his disdain. The boy came in wild, strikes heavy, each one cracking against Jamal's guard. Jamal absorbed the hits, pivoted, and landed a crisp counter. The tap was undeniable, clean as sunlight. Parents clapped from the benches before they could stop themselves. "Point!" a child yelled. Price's face reddened. "No point." "Control sloppy!" Groans rippled through the room. Parents shook their heads openly now. One mother stood, crossing her arms. "That was cleaner than anything I've seen tonight." Price's glare snapped toward her, but she didn't sit. "We're not blind," she added. The room buzzed. The spell of silence was breaking. After class, the locker room was louder than ever. The split was out in the open now. One loyalist muttered, "Price is right, the kid's sloppy." Carla shot back, "Then why does he land clean every time?" The room went quiet, all eyes flicking toward Jamal. He sat tying his shoes, silent, but the weight of their gazes pressed heavy. He wasn't trying to be a symbol, but he was becoming one. That night, Jamal walked home with Malik. His cousin shoved his hands into his pockets, shaking his head. "You feel it, don't you? You're not just some white belt anymore. You're the crack in his armor." Jamal sighed, bruises throbbing under his gi. "I never wanted that. I just wanted to train." Malik smirked. "Doesn't matter what you wanted. People don't choose symbols. Symbols happen when truth can't stay hidden." Jamal glanced up at the stars, the night air heavy on his skin. "Then maybe the truth has to stand taller than me." Back in his office, Price sat hunched at his desk, trophies glaring down at him like silent judges. He slammed his fist onto the wood, rattling the frames. "They're slipping from me," he growled. "Parents, students, even Troy, even Carla, all because of him." He picked up the phone, dialing the number he'd called so many times. "It's not enough. The demonstration didn't work. The gauntlet didn't work. Next time, it has to end." The voice on the other end crackled. "Careful, Darnell. Push too hard and you'll prove them right." Price's grip tightened. Better that than losing everything. The next day, Jamal found himself approached outside the dojo by two younger students. They clutched their belts nervously, eyes wide. "Mr. Jamal?" one whispered. "You're why I still come. Master Price? He scares me, but you don't." Jamal crouched, his chest tightening. "Don't call me mister. I'm just a student, same as you." The boy shook his head. "No, you're the one who shows us what respect looks like." Jamal swallowed hard, unsure what to say. All he could manage was, "Then promise me one thing. No matter what happens, keep standing. Even when it's hard." The boys nodded, eyes shining. That night, Jamal told his mother what had happened. She cupped his face gently, tears in her eyes. "You're becoming what your father always wanted. A man who fights not just for himself, but for others." Jamal lowered his gaze, his voice soft. "What if I'm not strong enough?" She smiled faintly. "Strength isn't never falling, baby. It's standing every time you do." The dojo was no longer just a school. It was a battlefield. Price clung to his authority like a drowning man, while whispers of truth spread like wildfire. And Jamal, whether he wanted it or not, was standing at the center. By midweek, the dojo no longer felt like Price's kingdom. The mats, once echoing with unquestioned obedience, now pulsed with hesitation. Every command he barked seemed to bounce off the walls rather than sink into the students. Every insult thrown at Jamal felt weaker, less convincing. Parents whispered louder now. Some lingered outside, their voices carrying into the training hall. "My son says the kid's cleaner than half the brown belts." "I've trained before. Those were points, every one of them." If Price won't admit it, then what does that say about him? The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were judgment. Price sensed it. His drills grew harsher, his voice louder, his punishments longer. But the harder he pushed, the less control he seemed to have. "Reed, again! Reed, sloppy as always! Reed, you'll never belong here!" But each time Jamal delivered. His punches cut sharp through the air. His stances held steady. His blocks came clean. The louder Price shouted, the more obvious the truth became. The master's words no longer matched reality. Students glanced at one another, lips twitching as if they wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Even Troy, once Price's most loyal black belt, flinched at the sound of his master's voice. That Thursday, Price announced something new. "On Saturday, we hold another demonstration," he declared. "A true test of skill. This time, there will be no doubt." The students exchanged uneasy looks. Carla's eyes narrowed. She leaned toward Jamal and whispered, "He's setting you up again. Be ready." Jamal's stomach nodded, but he nodded. "I'm not backing down." Training ended late that night. In the locker room, the divide broke open. One loyalist muttered, "Price will crush him this time. Put him back in his place." Another snapped back, "You mean like last time? Or the time before? He's the only one who stands up there without fear." The room fell silent. All eyes slid toward Jamal. He sat tying his shoes, quiet, but his very presence spoke louder than any argument. That night, Price sat alone in his office long after the dojo emptied. His trophies glinted dully in the shadows, no longer gleaming with pride. He picked up his phone again, dialing the familiar number. "This Saturday," he said coldly. "Make sure it happens. He won't walk out standing." The voice on the other end was calm. "Careful. Parents are watching. You push too far, you'll lose everything." Price's grip tightened on the receiver. Better to risk everything than watch it slip away piece by piece. Meanwhile, Jamal sat on his porch, Malik leaning against the railing with a soda in hand. "You know the neighborhood's buzzing, right?" Malik said. "Kids at school are talking. Parents too. You've become the story." Jamal shook his head, rubbing his sore ribs. "I don't want to be the story. I just wanted to train." Malik chuckled. "You can't control that, cuz. You stood up, and now everyone sees you as proof that he's not untouchable. That's bigger than karate." Jamal looked at the streetlights flickering in the night. "Bigger feels heavy." Malik's grin softened. "Yeah, but heavy things build muscle." Friday night, the dojo buzzed with tension. Parents filled the benches earlier than usual, as if they didn't want to miss what might come. Children whispered, reenacting Jamal's sweeps and counters. Even some loyalists looked uneasy, their confidence in Price cracking. During drills, Jamal felt every eye on him. He moved sharper, cleaner, more precise than ever. Each strike echoed like a promise. Each stance held like a vow. Carla whispered as they lined up, "Tomorrow, no matter what happens, remember, you're not alone." Troy added, his voice low but steady, "We're behind you." Jamal nodded, his throat tight. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just his fight anymore. That night, as Jamal folded his gi and placed it carefully on the chair in his room, his mother stepped in quietly. She sat beside him, her eyes soft but firm. "You know your father always said respect is earned, not demanded," she whispered. "Tomorrow, you don't just fight for yourself, you fight for everyone who's watching. Don't forget who you are." Jamal swallowed hard. "I won't, Ma." She kissed his forehead, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then stand tall, no matter what." Across town, Price lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. His empire of fear and discipline was crumbling. Tomorrow, he thought, would be the day he seized it back, or lost it forever. Saturday loomed. The dojo was about to become more than a place of training. It was about to become a reckoning. And Jamal knew, the truth wasn't just whispered anymore. Tomorrow, it would roar. Saturday evening, the dojo was packed wall to wall. Every bench overflowed with parents, extra chairs were dragged from the office, and children sat shoulder to shoulder on the mats. The buzz of voices filled the air like a hive, anticipation humming through every corner. For years, Master Price's demonstrations had been routine, controlled, choreographed displays of authority. But tonight felt different. Everyone knew it. Tonight was about Jamal. Tonight was about truth. Price emerged from his office in a gi so crisp it gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His black belt tails swung like banners, his chin lifted high. He bowed stiffly to the shrine, then turned to the audience with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "Tonight, you will witness what karate truly is. Discipline, respect, mastery. Too often, arrogance has been mistaken for skill. Tonight, that illusion ends." His gaze locked on Jamal. "Reed, step forward." Jamal's chest tightened, but his steps were steady. He bowed deeply, more to the art than to the man. "Os." Price didn't bow back. Instead, he gestured to the crowd. "This beginner has spirit, but spirit without discipline is dangerous. Tonight he will learn his place." The words rang heavy, but the audience didn't cheer. Parents exchanged looks, some frowning. Students shifted uneasily in line. Price raised his hands. "Hajime." The first exchange was brutal. Price lunged with lightning speed, fists and feet slicing the air. Jamal blocked what he could, absorbed what he couldn't, his body jolting under the weight of each strike. Gasps filled the room as a roundhouse clipped his ribs, forcing him back. "See," Price announced loudly, as if narrating. "Sloppy defense." But Jamal steadied, his breath ragged but his eyes focused. He slipped inside a jab, pivoted, and tapped Price's chest protector with a sharp counter. Pulled, clean, controlled. The sound echoed. Parents leaned forward. Children whispered. Price barked, "No point!" But the murmurs grew louder. The second round came harder. Price pressed forward relentlessly, sweat shining on his brow. Jamal staggered, but each time he found his footing. He blocked, pivoted, countered. Small taps that landed true, each one undeniable. By the third clean strike, the crowd was buzzing openly. "That was perfect!" He tagged him again. "Why won't he admit it?" Price's face flushed crimson. He roared louder, his strikes sharper, wilder. For the first time, his mastery looked less like control and more like desperation. Then it happened. Price overextended on a kick, his balance just a fraction off. Jamal saw it. The opening. His body moved before thought could catch up. Pivot, sweep, hips snapping. His fist tapped Price's torso with sharp precision, his foot hooking the master's leg just enough. Price stumbled. Not all the way down, but enough that the crowd gasped in unison. Jamal didn't press. He stepped back, bowed low, and said clearly, "Os." Silence held for a heartbeat. Then parents clapped. Not hesitantly, not half-heartedly, openly. Children cheered, students exchanged wide-eyed glances. "That was clean," someone shouted from the benches. "He had him," another called. Price froze, his chest heaving, his eyes blazed. "No point," he roared, his voice cracking. "Sloppy, out of control." But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. The whispers had become voices, the voices had become truth. Carla stepped forward from the line, her voice steady but strong. "With respect, Sensei, that was control. We all saw it." Gasps rippled. No student had ever spoken against Price in public. Troy added quietly but firmly, "She's right." Others began nodding, murmuring agreement. The dojo walls, once Price's fortress, now echoed with dissent. Price's face twisted with rage. "Enough!" he shouted. "Class dismissed." But the dismissal sounded hollow. Students bowed stiffly, the chorus of "Os" fractured and weak. Parents didn't leave right away. They lingered, muttering openly, some even clapping Jamal on the shoulder as they passed. "Good work, son. You showed us the truth." "Keep standing tall." Jamal bowed humbly to each, overwhelmed. In the locker room, the atmosphere buzzed. Carla grinned at him, eyes bright. "You did it." He stumbled. Everyone saw. Jamal shook his head, exhaustion heavy in his bones. "I didn't do it to make him stumble. I couldn't back down." Troy leaned in. "Doesn't matter. The truth's out. He can't bury it anymore." Back in his office, Price slammed the door shut, his chest heaving. He stared at his reflection in the trophy case, distorted and cracked. For years, his authority had been unquestioned. Tonight, it had cracked in front of everyone. He whispered through clenched teeth, "If I don't break him, I lose everything." But deep down, a new fear gnawed at him. Maybe he had already lost. That night, Jamal walked home under the streetlights, bruised but unbroken. The cheers, the claps, the whispered "good job" still echoed in his ears. For the first time, he realized the truth wasn't just whispered anymore. It was spoken aloud. And no matter what Price did next, the dojo would never be the same. The dojo sat unusually quiet on Monday evening. Parents still filled the benches, but their chatter was no longer hushed. It was deliberate, pointed. The whispers had become conversations, and the conversations had become complaints. "I didn't pay for this school to watch a master bully a student. Jamal shows more respect than Price has in months. If this keeps up, I'm pulling my kid." Students caught every word, their eyes darting nervously toward the office door. The divide was now carved deep. Those who still clung to Price's authority, and those who had already chosen Jamal as the true example of respect. Price emerged at last, his GI pristine, his belt tied so tightly it looked like a tourniquet. He bowed quickly to the shrine, then turned, his voice carrying through the hall. "Too much arrogance has poisoned this dojo," he declared. "Too much disrespect. It ends this week." His eyes found Jamal, steady and sharp. "Saturday, we will hold a final test. No interruptions, no excuses. A fight to prove who belongs on this mat." Gasps rippled through the room. Parents exchanged shocked looks, some muttering under their breath. A final test? For a white belt? Carla clenched her fists. Troy's jaw tightened. Jamal felt his stomach knot, but he bowed low, his voice calm. "Os." Training that night was relentless. Price barked corrections at everyone, but his venom was aimed squarely at Jamal. "Reed, lower! Reed, again! Reed, disgraceful!" But no matter how sharp the words, Jamal moved with quiet precision. His blocks snapped clean, his counters landed crisp, his stances rooted deeper each time. And the more Price shouted, the less convincing he became. Parents murmured openly now, "He's flawless. That's cleaner than any black belt here. Why does Price keep lying?" When sparring began, Price paired Jamal against his loyalists again, one after another. Each came at him hard, their strikes heavy with frustration. Jamal absorbed every blow, countered every attack with sharp control. His ribs screamed, his arms throbbed, but he stayed standing. By the third round, even the loyalists began faltering. They knew the truth as well as anyone. Jamal was landing points, clean and undeniable. "Sloppy!" Price barked after every strike, his voice louder, more desperate, but the crowd no longer bought it. Groans rippled openly from the benches. After class, Carla pulled Jamal aside. Her voice was urgent. "He's cornered. Saturday isn't training, it's a trap. He's going to try to humiliate you, maybe worse." Jamal's breath came heavy, his shoulders aching. "Then I'll be ready." Troy stepped closer. "You don't understand. This isn't just a test anymore. It's his last card. If he breaks you in front of everyone, he wins back control. If you stand, he loses everything." Jamal looked between them, his jaw tightening. "Then I can't fall." Meanwhile, in his office, Price sat hunched at his desk, the trophies behind him reflecting dull glints of light. He picked up the phone again, his voice low but sharp. "Saturday. Make sure it's set. I want it final. He won't walk away from this one." The voice on the other end replied, "If you go too far, the parents will revolt." Price's grip tightened on the receiver. "If I don't go far enough, I lose everything." That night, Jamal sat on his porch, Malik perched on the railing. The summer air was thick, the streetlights buzzing overhead. "You realize half the neighborhood's coming Saturday," Malik said with a grin. "Word's out. People want to see the showdown." Jamal sighed, rubbing his sore ribs. "I never wanted a showdown. I just wanted to learn." Malik shook his head. "Doesn't matter what you wanted. Now you're the one standing for everybody who's tired of being stepped on. That's bigger than karate, cuz." Jamal stared at the stars. "Bigger feels heavy." Malik's grin softened. "Then carry it like a belt. It'll fit one day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday." The dojo buzzed with anticipation. Parents talked openly now about pulling their children if Price kept his path. Students whispered about forming their own group if Jamal was forced out. The lines had hardened. On Friday night after class, a group of younger students approached Jamal nervously. One bowed low, his voice shaky. "Mr. Jamal, We believe in you. Don't let him scare you. Jamal crouched to their level, his voice steady. Don't call me mister, I'm just Jamal. But I promise, I won't break. The children nodded, eyes wide with trust. Back home, Jamal's mother sat beside him at the kitchen table. Her voice was soft but firm. Tomorrow, you don't fight for a belt. You don't fight for him. You fight for every eye that's watching. You fight for respect. Jamal nodded, his throat tight. I understand, Ma. She kissed his forehead gently. Then stand tall. Whatever happens, stand tall. Across town, Price sat alone in his darkened office, staring at the mirror on the wall. His reflection glared back at him, twisted by shadows. Tomorrow, he whispered. Tomorrow I end this. Saturday loomed like thunder. The dojo wasn't just a training hall anymore. It was a battlefield. And everyone knew, by the end of the day, only one truth would remain standing. Saturday arrived with the weight of a storm. By early evening, the dojo was overflowing. Every bench was taken, extra chairs lined the walls, and people from the neighborhood crowded near the entrance just to get a glimpse. The buzz of voices was electric, part fear, part anticipation, part defiance. Children clutched their parents' sleeves, whispering stories they'd repeated all week. He beat Troy once. He made Master Price stumble. Tonight, it's for real. The air smelled of sweat, tatami mats, and tension so thick you could feel it. Price emerged from his office in a GI so crisp it looked ironed minutes before. His black belt tails hung perfectly even, his posture rigid. He bowed to the shrine, then turned with a smile that stretched wide but cold. Welcome, he said, voice commanding the hall. Tonight, we settle the question once and for all. Respect is not given, it is earned. And no white belt will ever stand above tradition. His gaze locked on Jamal. Reed, step forward. Gasps swept the room. Jamal's stomach knotted, but his steps didn't falter. He bowed deeply. Os. Price addressed the audience like a performer. Tonight, Reed faces me. No light contact, no excuses, full demonstration. Parents shifted uncomfortably. Carla's face tightened. Troy clenched his fists at his side. Hajime? Price struck first, a blur of fists and feet. His jab cracked like a whip. His roundhouse thudded against Jamal's guard. Jamal staggered but held. He blocked, slid, pivoted. Each breath came ragged, each counter sharp but controlled. Too slow, Price barked between strikes. But the crowd could see, Jamal was holding his ground. He slipped inside a punch, tapped Price's ribs clean, controlled. Perfect. No point, Price roared. Parents groaned audibly. That was clean, someone shouted from the benches. The room buzzed louder. Price pressed harder, sweat dripping, strikes wild with fury. Jamal blocked desperately, his arms screaming, but his eyes stayed steady. He ducked and pivoted, countered again, another clean strike. This time the crowd erupted. Point! Perfect control! He's got him! Price's face flushed crimson. He stumbled half a step, then roared, Sloppy! Out of control! But his words rang hollow. The fight stretched on. Price's mastery was undeniable, but his desperation was obvious. Jamal, bruised and battered, refused to fall. Each clean counter, each sharp sweep, chipped away at the illusion Price had built for years. Finally, it happened. Price lunged with a high kick, overcommitted. Jamal saw the opening, hips twisting, foot sweeping low, fist tapping square against the master's chest. Price stumbled, not fully down but enough for the dojo to gasp as one. Jamal stepped back immediately, bowed low. Os, silence held for a heartbeat. Then the room erupted. Parents clapped, children cheered, students shouted. That was perfect! He had him. No denying it this time. Carla's voice rang above the noise. With respect, sensei, everyone saw it. That was control. Troy stepped forward, his voice steady. He's earned respect. More students began nodding, voices rising. Respect! Respect! The word rippled like a wave. Price froze, his chest heaving. His eyes blazed with rage. He raised his hand to shout, but the sound was drowned out. The parents were clapping openly now. Students were chanting. Jamal stood in the center of the mat, bruised but unbroken, while the storm swelled around him. For the first time, Master Price's voice wasn't the loudest in the room. Enough! Price roared, but the command fell flat. The chorus of respect, respect drowned him out. His face twisted, his hands trembling. He turned sharply, storming back into his office, the door slamming like thunder. The crowd kept roaring. Carla ran to Jamal, eyes shining. "You did it! You stood tall!" Jamal shook his head, chest heaving. "I just didn't fall." Troy stepped up, clapping him on the shoulder. "Sometimes that's all it takes to win." Parents gathered around, some shaking Jamal's hand, others patting his back. One father said firmly, "You showed us what respect really means." "Thank you." Jamal bowed humbly, overwhelmed. That night, as the dojo emptied, whispers spilled into the street. The story spread fast, how the white belt had stood against the master, how the crowd had sided with him, how truth had finally broken through the cracks of authority. Inside his office, Price sat alone, trembling hands gripping his belt. His trophies glared back at him, not with pride but accusation. For years he had demanded respect. Tonight he had watched it walk away, toward a boy who had earned it. Meanwhile, Jamal walked home under the glow of the street lamps, his bruises burning, but his spirit steady. The chant still echoed in his ears, "Respect! Respect!" For the first time he knew the truth wasn't just spoken, it was shouted. And no one, not even Master Price, could silence it anymore. Monday evening, the dojo was quieter than it had been in years. Parents still filled the benches, but there was no chatter, no nervous energy. Instead, there was expectation. The events of Saturday still rang in everyone's ears. Jamal's clean counters, Price's stumble, the roar of "respect, respect" that had drowned out the master's voice. When the students lined up, something new happened. Their eyes flicked not to Price, but to Jamal. It wasn't rebellion, it was trust. Price emerged from his office slower than usual, his GI still immaculate but his shoulders tense. He bowed to the shrine, then turned to face his students. His jaw worked as he searched for words. "Saturday was a demonstration," he began, forcing calm. "But too many of you misunderstood. Karate is not about cheers or applause or lucky strikes. It is about order." His voice echoed flatly in the room. No one responded. Drills began, but the rhythm was broken. Students moved through the motions, but their eyes shifted toward Jamal each time Price barked an insult. "Reed, sloppy again!" Jamal's punches snapped crisp, his stance rooted firm. Students noticed, parents noticed. The correction fell empty. Carla whispered to Troy, "They're not listening anymore." Troy nodded. "They're seeing." When sparring rounds began, Price tried to reassert control. He paired Jamal with loyalists again, but the matches told the truth. Jamal's counters were sharp, his blocks precise, his control flawless. One parent clapped openly after a clean strike. Others joined. Soon the benches buzzed with murmurs, louder than Price's commands. "That's skill. He's earned his place. Price can't hide it." Price's face reddened, his teeth grinding. "No point!" he barked again, but the groans from the crowd drowned him out. Finally, Carla stepped onto the mat to spar Jamal. Their movements were crisp, respectful, flowing like water. Every strike clean, every block controlled. By the end, the entire room was silent. Not with tension, but with awe. Carla bowed low. "Respect," she said clearly. Jamal bowed back. "Respect." The word hung in the air like a verdict. Price snapped, "Enough." His voice cracked. "I am the master here. I decide what counts." But the benches erupted. Parents stood, their voices strong. "No, you don't." "We all saw." "He earned it." Students murmured agreement, some even chanting again, "Respect! Respect!" Price's face twisted. He opened his mouth to shout, but no sound came. For the first time, his authority had vanished. Not chipped, not cracked, but gone. The class ended not with Price's dismissal, but with Jamal bowing to his peers. Students bowed back, some whispering "Os" with more conviction than they'd given Price in weeks. Carla placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "It's done. He can't take it back." Troy added quietly, "You didn't just stand for yourself. You stood for all of us." That night, Price sat alone in his office, the trophies around him dull in the fading light. His hands trembled as he untied his belt, the black fabric that had once commanded respect, now feeling like a noose. He had demanded obedience for years, and tonight he had watched it dissolve into nothing. For the first time, he whispered the truth he had fought to deny. "I've lost them." Meanwhile, Jamal walked home under the summer night sky, Malik beside him. The street lamps glowed, cicadas hummed, the world felt lighter. You realize you changed everything, right? Malik said with a grin. Kids are calling you the real sensei. Parents are talking about pulling out if Price doesn't step down. You're the reason they believe again. Jamal shook his head, his voice soft. I never wanted to take his place. I just wanted respect. Malik clapped him on the back. And that's why you earned it. The following week, parents called a meeting. Price tried to stand firm, but the tide was too strong. Voices rose, complaints poured, and finally, demands were spoken aloud. We want honesty. We want respect. We want Jamal to stay. For once, Price had no answer. His silence spoke louder than any denial. Weeks later, the dojo looked different. The walls were the same, the mats the same, but the energy had shifted. Students trained harder, sharper, with laughter mixing into the rhythm of drills. Parents watched proudly, no longer whispering but smiling openly. Jamal still wore his white belt, but students lined up to bow to him, their respect genuine. Carla and Troy trained beside him, their friendship steady. Even the younger kids whispered his name with pride, their eyes shining. For the first time, the dojo belonged not to fear, but to truth. One evening, as Jamal stood in horse stance, sweat dripping, his mother stepped into the doorway. She watched quietly until class ended, then smiled. You did it, she whispered. Not by shouting, not by forcing, by standing. Jamal bowed his head. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. She kissed his forehead, tears glistening. And you earned it. As Jamal walked home that night, the cicadas humming, the stars bright above, he realized something. The fight had never been about belts or ranks. It had been about dignity, about truth, about proving that respect could never be forced. It had to be given freely. And now it was.